Hi, gang. I have an obsession with all things mystery, history, conspiracy, and paranormal. I love to do deep dives on topics I often stumble upon surely by accident, and I love to tell tales. So, welcome to Sit and Spin. I have my coffee, Nectar of Life. So good. Today, I thought I would spin some Manx, I think it said Laughton. Manx Laughton. I think that's how it's said. That I got in my Will Interrupted Fiber of the Month Club. I've never spun this before, so I'm really curious to see how it works up. It is much softer than I thought it would be. So, first thing I did, grabbed my fleece and fiber source book, and I looked up the Manx Laughton. Look at the sheep. They got big horns. They're kind of cool. Scary. I wouldn't have one. I have a fear of horned sheep. I know it's ridiculous, but that's just the way it is. So, some fleece facts. Their fleece weight is 3 to 5.5 pounds. The staple length is 2.5 to 5 inches. The average there's two types. There's a woolly type and a hairy type. Not on the same sheep, but within the breed. So the woolly type averages 27 microns, which is really soft. The hairy type is 33, so that's getting into the coarser fibers. The locks are close textured and uniformly brown throughout with some luster. And the natural color is soft brown. The tips tend to sun bleach to a lighter shade. So this is what, let me see, I just want to get the glare off it so you can see. This is what their staples look like. All right, let's look for some advice on spinning. So using the Manx Laughton fiber. It can be dyed. Pick and card or comb fibers that are long enough. Between the fingers, Manx Laughton comes across as a relatively soft fiber with an exceptional amount of bounce, a quality that can be maximized through woolen style preparation and spinning. Prepared and spun worsted style, it can be very durable. Best known for unusual color and softness, should be better known than it is because of its resilience and all-around appealing character. And just FYI, they were almost extinct 50 years ago. So, taking this information, I don't know how to spin it. I think we're going to go woolen. So what I'm going to do, let's open up my fiber here, because this is a top, and you can see all the fibers are going pretty much in the same direction. I'm going to make faux legs, not roll legs, faux legs. I'm just going to tip you down so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to take a chunk off the end. I'm going to spread it out. Draft it just a little bit. Just to give it a more even spread. And then I'm just going to roll it up. Oh, is it ever springy? It doesn't want to roll because it has so much spring. Okay. And there we have a faux log. And I will just spin off the end. So I will prepare a few of these. And then we will get spinning. And we will get to our story for today, which is a very sad tale of the Sodder family. I'll get a few more of these ready to go, and we'll get to spinning. All right, I have my faux logs, and we're ready to get started. talk about the Sodder family. Christmas Eve in 1945, George and Jenny Sodder, along with 9 of their 10 children, settled in for the night. Their one son, Joe, was off serving in the army, so only 9 of them were home at the time. Around 1 a.m., a fire broke out in the house. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children escaped the fire, but 5 children were never seen again. It's a tragic tale, to be sure, but what about this caught my interest? There is so much craziness, guys. So much. But first, let's meet the family. George and Jenny were both Italian immigrants who came to the United States separately when they were younger. Once they met and married, they quickly settled into family life in Fayetteville, West Virginia. George ran a successful trucking business and was universally reported as a nice man, although he did have strong opinions on everything from business to politics. He never spoke about why he left Italy, a secret he would always keep, but he was very proud to be American and denounced the fascist leader Mussolini publicly all the time. Just going to turn you a little bit so you can see more of the draft. I'll back you up a bit. There we go. Jenny, of course, had a full-time job raising her brood of children. In the winter of 1945, they covered a huge span of ages. Youngest to oldest, they were Sylvia, age 2, Betty, aged 5, Jenny, aged 8, Louis, aged 9, Martha, aged 12, Maurice, aged 14, George Jr., age 16, Marion, age 17, and John, age 23. And then, of course, there was Joe, who was off serving in the military as World War II was just coming to an end. Now, since there's 2 Jennys and 2 Georges, we're going to call Mama Jenny, and we'll call George Jr. just Jr., since if I called him Father George, you'd think I was talking about a priest. I'm not. I'm talking about the father of the family, George. So we have George and we have Junior. So they were just an average middle-class family looking forward to presents Christmas morning. On Christmas Eve, Marion, who had a job at 17, she was working and had her own money, so she bought the younger children some toys. And Christmas Eve, she gave them to them so that they could open them early and play with them. They were so excited that they begged Mama Jenny to let them stay up late and continue playing. She made them promise that they would remember to close the curtains, turn off the lights, and lock the front door after they fed the few farm animals the family kept, and that they had to do that before they went to bed. Betty, Jenny, Louis, Martha, and Maurice all promised, cross my heart, that they would do that. So Mama Jenny allowed them to stay up late. Junior and John, too old for that nonsense, went ahead up to bed. Marion was stretched on the couch, watching her younger siblings enjoy the gifts she had given them. And she was dozing off and on, so everything was peaceful and supervised. Satisfied that all was right with her family, Mama Jenny and George headed for their room, where baby Sylvia was already asleep in her crib. Around 12:30, Mama Jenny was woken by the shrill sound of the phone ringing. Everyone knows if the phone rings after 10 p.m., it's an emergency, so she leapt from bed and ran to the main floor office to answer it. A strange woman asked for a man Mama Jenny had never heard of, and when Mama Jenny said so, the strange woman gave a nervous laugh over the sounds of glasses clinking and conversation in the background before hanging up. When she went to return to bed, Mama Jenny saw the living room lights were still on. Even worse, the curtains and front door lock were still open. Marion was asleep on the couch, so Mama Jenny left her sleep, closing the curtains, locking the door, and turning off the lights. Typical kids to forget. Good thing Christmas was only once a year. Back in bed, Mama Jenny was just falling back asleep when she heard something hit the roof and roll, a sound like a heavy pine cone would make. But she didn't hear anything further and figured maybe she was just hearing something that didn't actually happen as she had started to drift off. So she went to sleep. But about an hour later, she was woken again, this time by the smell of smoke. Bolting from bed, she woke George and tried to get to the phone to call for help. But the office was already in flames. She grabbed little Sylvia and fled out of the house, rousing Marion from the couch along the way. Once outside, George did a head count and realized 5 kids were still in the house, upstairs in their bedroom. He tried to charge back in, but the flames had spread to the entrance. He broke out a window, but saw that the stairs were engulfed. He wasn't going to be able to get in that way. He'd need to get to the second-story windows to rescue his children. He raced for the garage where he kept his ladder, but unbelievably, it was gone. Mind racing, his next plan was to bring one of the 2 tall delivery trucks he kept in the yard over beside the house and hop on the roof to reach the windows. But when he went to start the truck, it wouldn't start. Neither would the other one. Water. He and his sons ran to the rain barrels to combat the fires, but the barrels were frozen solid. There was nothing they could do but watch helplessly as they waited for the volunteer fire department and hope for the best. While George was trying to access the house, Marion sprinted for the neighbor's house to call the fire department. In 1945, calls still went through an operator, and when Marion picked up the phone, there wasn't anyone manning the lines. Another neighbor at a local tavern saw the flames and also tried to call in. He got no answer either. So he jumped in his truck and actually drove to the house of the fire chief, F.J. Morris, to raise the alarm. I love small towns. Everybody knows where everybody lives. The fire department was strictly volunteer, and there was a phone tree to summon them, meaning each person was responsible for calling 1 or 2 others until everyone was informed. Not the fastest method for raising a force, but it was what they had. That doesn't explain why it took 7 hours to get the 2.5 miles to the burning residence. They arrived long after the house had been consumed by the flames. That only took about 45 minutes. The family was grieving, obviously. I can't even begin to imagine what they went through, having to just stand there and watch the house containing 5 children burn to the ground. The fire was brutal and so fast, and all that was left was timbers and rubble in the basement. Local police came with the fire department and did a cursory investigation. The coroner was consulted, and it was determined the 5 children had perished in the fire, which had been caused by faulty wiring. But a search through the debris revealed no remains. Chief Morris suggested the blaze had been hot enough to completely cremate the bodies, and death certificates were issued. The mortician suggested George and Mama Jenny should take 5 handfuls of ash from the debris to represent each of the children and bury those so that they could have the closure of graves. After a state police inspector combed the rubble and confirmed the cause of the fire was faulty wiring, George bulldozed the rubble, covering the basement with 5 feet of dirt, planning to preserve the site as a memorial to his children. And sometime after that, the numbing shock began to wear off, and the Sodders started to question the official story. While checking for anything salvageable before bulldozing the debris, Jenny noticed kitchen appliances that were still intact. Surely, if the fire had burned hot enough to destroy bones, it would have melted those appliances. She started experimenting with animal bones, looking to see how hot a flame was needed to reduce them to ash. She couldn't make a flame hot enough. So she called a crematorium to ask them how much heat it took. They told her a 2-hour fire at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit still wasn't hot enough to reduce bones to ash. Meanwhile, George was questioning the official cause of the fire and remembering a strange incident from earlier that year. A man had been looking for work and had offered to fix the fuse boxes at the Sodder residence, pointing out that they were going to cause a problem someday. George refused the man work, but had the power company come and inspect the boxes. Since they'd recently had electrical work done for the installation of an electric range, everything was given a pass, perfectly safe. And despite the assertion of the police, the lights had still been working as the family fled the house the night of the fire. Surely if it was faulty wiring that caused the fire, those lights would have been out? Then they recalled an incident with an insurance salesman who'd come to the house. When George declined coverage, things got heated and ended with the salesman declaring, "The house would go up in smoke and your children will be destroyed." The salesman said this was because of George's dirty remarks about Mussolini. With this information, the Sodders went back to the police and demanded to have the fire further investigated. But the police refused, claiming that the coroner's inquiry determined that no crime had been committed. So the Sodders were on their own. They hired a private investigator, and more strangeness turned up. A telephone repairman reported that the phone line to the Sodders' house had been cut at the top of the pole on the night of the fire, not melted by the flames. This had to have happened after the strange phone call at 12:30 that Mama Jenny had answered. The missing ladder that George had tried to grab to rescue the children was found hidden in a ravine not far from the house, so it had been deliberately moved. And then there were witnesses. A bus driver for a local run through Fayetteville late Christmas Eve said he had seen people throwing balls of fire at the house. And a few months later, little Sylvia found a small, hard, dark green rubber ball-like object in the brush near the burned-down house. George thought it looked like a pineapple bomb or some other incendiary device. The family believed the fire had started on the roof, not at the fuse box like the official story from the coroner's inquiry said. And about that inquiry, Rosser Long was one of the people on the panel. Why should that matter? Well, you see, Rosser Long was the insurance salesman that had threatened the Sodders months before the fire. And not only did he sit on the board for the coroner's inquiry, but he was never questioned about his encounter with the Sodders. This is super sketch. And it always comes back to there were no remains found in the debris of the fire. 5 children were not reduced to ash in a fire that burned for less than an hour. It wasn't long or hot enough to destroy the bones and teeth. Some remains should have been found. Then the private detective found more witnesses, some who saw the 5 children after the fire. One neighbor said she saw the children in a car driving away on the night of the fire. Thinking they were just being taken to safety, she didn't think anything more of it. But as the story became news and pictures of the children began to circulate, even more witnesses came forward. A woman operating a tourism stop between Fayetteville and Charleston says she saw the children the morning after the fire. Quote, "I served them breakfast. There was a car with Florida license plates at the tourist court too." End quote. Another woman, this one who ran a Charleston hotel, claimed to have seen 4 of the 5 children a week after the fire. Quote, "The children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of Italian extraction. I do not remember the exact date. However, the entire party did register at the hotel and stayed in a large room with several beds. They registered about midnight. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but they appeared hostile and refused to allow me to talk to these children. One of the men looked at me in a hostile manner. He turned around and began talking rapidly in Italian. Immediately, the whole party stopped talking to me. I sensed that I was being frozen out, and so I said nothing more. They left early the next morning." End quote. All this seemed to point to the children being alive. Abducted, but alive. Perhaps when the boys had gone out to feed the animals, the girls had gone along and all 5 had been captured outside the house. The fire could have just been to cover up the crime. So, in 1947, George and Mama Jenny sent a letter to the FBI, hoping to get their assistance on the case since local authorities were being of little to no help. They received a reply from J. Edgar Hoover himself. Quote, "Although I would like to be of service, the matter related appears to be of local character and does not come within the investigative jurisdiction of this Bureau." End quote. He did, however, say his agents would assist if they could get permission from the local authorities. Of course, Fayetteville police and fire departments declined the offer. Something very sketchy going on. So the Sodders put up a billboard with the pictures of all 5 children and a brief summary of events, including their conviction that local authorities were involved. They were pleading for information on the location of their missing children. They offered a $10,000 reward. So, of course, over the next few years, tips and leads came in. George traveled the country, checking them all out, but nothing ever led to the children or the truth of what happened to them. 20 years after the fire, Mama Jenny found an envelope addressed to her from a Kentucky postmark, but without a return address. Inside, there was a photograph of a man in his late 20s. On the reverse of the photo was written, quote, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. Illy boys, A90132 or 35, end quote. She and George couldn't deny the resemblance to their boy Louis, who was only 9 at the time of the fire. They hired another private detective and they sent him to Kentucky to try and find the man in the picture. The private investigator was never seen again. Did he just take the money and run, or did something more sinister happen? With all the twists and turns in this story, it could go either way. The Sodders updated their billboard with this new photo. They were so convinced it was Louis. In an interview, George said, quote, "Time is running out for us, but we only want to know. If they did die in the fire, we want to be convinced. Otherwise, we want to know what happened to them," end quote. He died later that year in 1968. Mama Jenny lived until 1989, and the billboard stayed up until after her death. Her children and grandchildren still continue to investigate. The youngest and last surviving sibling, Sylvia, doesn't believe her siblings perished in the fire. She even visits crime-sleuthing websites and engages with people still interested in the case, hoping to someday find a clue that confirms one way or another what happened to those 5 children on that Christmas Eve in 1945. Unfortunately, we'll probably never know. I hope you enjoyed a good yarn. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you at the next Sit and Spin.